Is nog nie oppie.
Okay, no, it's not a problem. I mean, I haven't checked if anything is up. I'm too nervous to see my own face. It's terrible. But what I do want to say, I went running now and was praying, and I really don't know how to actually do this topic with the feast, because it feels like so simple. You start and tell about the feast and tell how they point to Christ, and then the old story about half of the feast had been fulfilled already, and the feast that's coming up is about to see fulfillment in the future. But the truth of the matter is, it's deeper than that. As I'm studying and reading and trying to read articles on the feast, I just realized it's weaved into the text. It is simply mind-blowing how detailed God is engaging with us with this whole thing of having appointed times, appointed places, rhythms, repetitions. It's so foreign to our worldview, because in our worldview, you read Psalm 23, you discover the meaning of that, and then you move on, and then kind of you have an answer, right? Then you can tell people, when you read Psalm 23, this is what it says. But in Hebrew understanding, it's like an open mine. Every year you come around the same kind of circle, but every following year, your digging is deeper, and your understanding grows deeper. And so why I'm saying this is just I want, in no way do I want to say I think I have come to understand everything about the feasts. Far from it. I am discovering that the Bible is very clear on wanting us to draw us into this, and so hopefully, if by the end of next month we've kind of touched on that, and it deepens at least our hunger for going deeper, then I think we've succeeded. Because fact of the matter is, in Hebrew thinking, we're going to repeat everything next year in any case, and then hopefully we'll have another layer to discuss, like peeling an onion. But for this time around, I want us just to, and I'm going to repeat some of what we did last week, not because some of you missed it. It's for myself as well, because I realize I need to be dealing with this, especially in a patch where the feasts occurred together. And we're going to look at how the Hebrew calendar works now. I made a little document, and then we can kind of have it visual. Last week we spoke about it, but I realized one almost have to read it and allow this thing to speak to you from a visual point of view. So, without further ado, Ziggy, can I share screen? I can, yeah. I'm going to. Let's go to this little document. Let me just see what we're all seeing. Yeah. Okay. So for those who've missed out let me quickly go through it. Exodus 10 verse 9, a very curious passage where Moses, or Moshe as he's called in the Hebrew Bible, is sent to Pharaoh to rescue the nation of Israel. He quotes this little line: "We will go, for we must hold a feast to Yahweh." Okay, that's what he tells Pharaoh. Imagine what a funny thing that is. But what he does tell Pharaoh is he tell him the word there, the noun is chag. Chag is what normally in Israel, when you say, for example, Happy Feast of Tabernacles, you would say Chag Sukkot or Chag Sameach Sukkot. That would mean a festival, a joyous festival of Sukkot. Okay, so Chag, even today, is the acceptable word, but the word Chag comes from the verbal form Chagag, and like I've repeated myself a million times, in Hebrew, you always try to find out what is the verbal form behind any concept. Because the Hebrew is not a Greek language where it's about form and appearance. It's all about actions. So what goes on behind chag is the word chagag, which means to move in a circle. Now, first of all, that move in a circle is, on the one end, it may mean that you physically do a form of a dance. It may mean that. But what I know from Hebrew, it's a little bit more bigger picture, nomadic vibes going on here. Move in a circle means the feasts of Yahweh are things that we do repetitively. We do it annually. We do it again and again. So we've covered that. We moved on. In Leviticus 23, which is the big chapter about the feasts, we read about the appointed times of Yahweh. This is the word, Mo'edei Yahweh, the appointed times of Yahweh, and that's how you spell it in Hebrew. But the word Mo'ed is again a noun form, and the verbal form behind that is the verb ya'ad, and ya'ad means to fix, and it also means to meet. So you've got feast on the one end, which means to move in a circle, repetitive action, and then you have this whole, the appointed time, a fixed time of meeting. Okay, very important. Seems to be very important to Yahweh. And then which is very important, Leviticus 23 verse 2, the set feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be convocations of set apart. Now check this out. These are my moving in circles. Okay, it's not the Jews, it's not the Christians, it's not some other sect, it's not even the sect that Paul belonged to, which he called the Way. These are Yahweh's festivals, and I think for this very particular reason we pay special attention. Now, for tonight's little bit of Bible, what we call it, academics, we will look at a number of things. First of all, the Hebrew calendar, by the way, not the modern Hebrew calendar. The modern Hebrew calendar is a mixture of things which is more suitable to call it almost the Gregorian calendar, and I'll explain that to you now. We are on the Gregorian calendar. Basically, it means we can mathematically calculate exactly how long a day would be, how long a month would be, how long a year would be. Okay? Not so in ancient Hebrew. In ancient Hebrew, it was called a lunisolar calendar. The months had the lunar aspect, but the solar aspect, which was tied to the seasons, made them call a lunar month plus a solar year. And that combination was called a lunisolar calendar. Now, I will repeat myself when we get to the feasts themselves. But what is very important at this point of time is the Gregorian calendar. And by the way, later on, after the Jews had been in the land of Babylon and they returned, they had a whole complicated, convoluted system of half Babylonian, half remnant of their ancient Hebrew thinking. And that was, there was a rabbi by the name, let me just remember his name. Who knows the guy's name? It's going to come back to me now. The guy who actually instituted the modern kind of Hebrew calendar. But anyway, the ancient Hebrew calendar worked as follows. The month began when the rabbis spotted the crescent moon hanging over the city of Jerusalem. That could only have been seen when you were on the Mount of Olives, all right? And if you would kind of calculate the amount of days it would take for the crescent moon to go through all of its phases, become a dark moon, and become a crescent moon again, was in the vicinity of 29 days, 29 point something. Okay. A month started when the moon was sighted. This is super important. And when the moon had started, they called that the head of the moon, Rosh Chodesh. And then you basically started counting the days. This is super important, and we'll talk about that right now. The problem with a lunar month and a solar year combination was that counting the moons only caused a small drift, a seasonal drift. And this basically resulted in an 11-day gap, because the moon, the days, what we call a lunar month is something like 29.3 days. But a lunar month, if there was something like that, but we have a solar month is closer to 30 point something days. So over a course of 12 months, you would lose around 11 days. The problem with that is that every fourth year you would be out with a month, and then they added an additional month. The reason for that was the beginning of the year, which we read in Exodus 12 verse 1, where God says this month, the month of Aviv or the month of Nisan, is the beginning of the year. That year, beginning of the year, or that beginning of the month, was spotted when the barley on the field was ripe. The word for ripe in Hebrew is Aviv. That's why the month name is Aviv. Now, Ati and I had a quick discussion the other day, just to quickly check on, does the Bible ever talk about a leap year? Does it talk about waiting for the barley? No, the Bible does not say it. These things are assumed into this whole agricultural worldview. It's a difficult thing, because the Bible, a lot of things the Bible doesn't tell us, but it assumes that from a Hebrew cultural point of view, and that's why it is so important that we study the Hebrew culture. All right. Now, all of these things in mind. Remember, we have like a 29.3 day lunar month. If you add them up, you get something like 353, 354, some years 355 days, in the vicinity of 11 days shorter than the Gregorian year that we live on. Okay, we'll get back to all of those. Now, let's follow this diagram quickly. The first biblical month is the month of Nisan. The second is Iyar. The third is Sivan. The fourth is Tammuz. Then Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shabbat, Adar. Remember, if ever you want to read a Hebrew word, you just imagine you're from Malmesbury. And for those who's not living in South Africa, that is an area near us where people brei lekker, they say rrr. So if you say Tishrei, you'd say Tishrei, right? Christy and you can do that very easily with your Middle Eastern accents. Okay, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shabbat, Adar. Right. The problem is in this little column here. The Jewish people consider the seventh month, which is coming up, by the way, the seventh biblical month, as the first month of the year. Okay. Where did that happen? We are not exactly sure, but it happened in Babylon. And by the way, some people ask, but how is the seventh month of the year considered as the beginning of the year, as the new year? Don't worry, they have more New Years than that. They have a ecclesiastical or biblical New Year. They have a civil New Year. They have a New Year for the trees. And actually, there's another New Year that I can't find the origin over the source for. But we are now in the month of Elul. This coming Friday, the 19th, the evening, will be basically what they call Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. All right, this will be the first day of the seventh month. But in Israel, it will be the first day of the first civil month, Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but this is a very important point, and it's a very big problem right now, right as we speak. Most Christians who is on this Hebrew journey, unfortunately, has bought into the Jewish, or shall I say, the rabbinical Jewish way of talking about all things. So they would be celebrating Rosh Hashanah, which is from just a casual point of view, it doesn't seem to be a problem. But the problem is the fact that Christians and Jews celebrate Rosh Hashanah, meaning the first of the first and not the first of the seventh month, means the most important festival on the Hebrew calendar has been hidden. All right. So this festival that is about to happen on Friday evening and the entire Shabbat, this coming Shabbat, is called the Feast of Trumpets, not Rosh Hashanah. But in civil Israel, they will be celebrating equivalent to our 31st of December, Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah in Hebrew means head of the year. Okay, so here's a little thing. For those who's interested, I will send this document as a PDF. It is at least interesting. I copied this from Wikipedia, just as a slight disclaimer. Right, let's move on to this part. Curiously, let's look at the numbers going on. The first month, as we've seen on this calendar, is the month of Nisan. The third month is the month of Sivan, and the seventh month is the month of Tishrei. Interestingly, the word Nisan, the word Sivan, and the word Tishrei, none of them are Hebrew words. They are Babylonian words. They are Aramaic words. Interestingly, the Bible calls the month of Nisan Aviv. It calls the month of Sivan Arach Semanu, and it calls the month of Tishrei Etanim that we see in 1 Kings. Okay, back to the numbers. First month, the month of Nisan or Aviv, there are 3 feasts. Okay, very important. It's the Feast of Pesach, Chag HaMatzot, Bikurim. In the third month, you have 1 feast called Shavuot. And in the 7th month, which is the month that starts on Friday evening, you have 3 feasts. Your Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement or Day of Covering, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay, let's quickly go through all of them. We have tackled these last week, but just so that you get an understanding. I try to group the 3 months as 3 entities. There's a reason for that. The Bible says, and I'm going to read it to you. Let me quickly turn to Leviticus just a second. No, wait. Exodus 34, verse 22. Just hang on, please. Okay, verse 22, you shall observe the Feast of Weeks. First Feast of Weeks is this one, the Shavuot festival. Okay, you shall observe the Feast of Weeks with the first fruits of the wheat harvest. That's, by the way, what the feast is about. We'll come to that now. And the Feast of Harvest at the end of the year. Now, check this out, verse 23, Exodus 34, verse 20. 3 times in a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord Yahweh, the God of Israel. This is a very interesting thing. We casually read over that. We actually don't understand what it means. But these 3 times that it speaks are these 3 groups of festivals, okay? It's this combination of Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, and First Fruits. That's the first time. It's called the first pilgrimage. Then the second one is the Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of Shavuot. And the third pilgrimage, or the third time that you have to go up to Jerusalem, is this group of festivals. It actually extends over a period of 15 days. Feast of Trumpets, Day of Covering, and Tabernacles. Let's go back to this one. First pilgrimage festival, Passover.
Okay. And
Hello.
send it to my WhatsApp so I could.
Hallo Ziggy, ons hoor jou. Geen probleem. Okay, first, wait just a second. Are you still there? Sorry, lots of academy. Please bear with me. It makes sense later. Okay, here we go. Right, the first festival, Passover. I'm not going to go into detail now because we need to speak about the Feast of Trumpets. But Passover literally is a single day out of an 8-day period. It's called the 14th of Nisan, or the 14th of the month of Aviv, and that is the time in ancient Israel when the head of the family, the father of the household, had to slaughter a year-old lamb that had been inspected for 4 days. And that whole thing about roasting the meat and using the blood to put on the lintels of the door, that we all know. And I mean, in Christian circles, that is celebrated. Unfortunately, we use the name Easter there, and I will speak more about that when we get to that next year. But it's not called Easter in the Bible. It's called Passover in the Bible. Very important. Easter, the word, is a word that comes from the Aramaic word ustre, which means the feast of fertility. That's why you have the kunena and the eggs and the chocolate and all those things, because they basically celebrate the goddess of fertility. It's not good to call Passover Easter. If there's anything that you might want to unlearn, it is that. Second festival is Chag HaMatzot. Now, in some Jewish circles, Chag HaMatzot is the entire 8-day festival, of which Pesach is basically the first day in some circles. But the Bible makes it very clear that Pesach falls on the 14th of Nisan, and the Chag HaMatzot starts on the 15th of Nisan, and it lasts till the 22nd. Okay, it's a 7-day festival, of which the first and the last days are Shabbatot. They are days of rest. And then Bikurim is a feast it's very obscure. The Bible doesn't say a lot about Bikurim. It also doesn't say a lot about Feast of Trumpets, by the by. But Bikurim, the Bible makes it clear, starts on the day after the weekly Shabbat within the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Very important, because if you miss that detail, you will never understand the curious situation that happened with Jesus' death and his burial, and how Mary and the women rocked up at the grave on the morning after the Shabbat. And if you don't understand that there's 2 Shabbatot within the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you don't understand on which day they rocked up and why Jesus actually rose on the day of first fruits after being in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, not the way we're taught in the church, 1.5 days, Friday afternoon till Sunday morning. We will cover this next year this is just so that we have a kind of an understanding. Pesach, Chag HaMatzot, and Bikurim had been fulfilled in the first coming of Jesus. Okay, there is so much detail in that hopefully, if God spares us till that time, I want us to dig deep. It is simply fabulous to see the detail, the intricate detail. And one thing I want to say about Bikurim, whereas Chag HaMatzot and Pesach, they kind of are fixed in the sense of Chag HaMatzot always starts on a Shabbat, but then because you have weekly Shabbatot that literally moves non-stop in the background, you have 6 days and you have a 7th day rest. Because of the lunar calendar, the Feast of Unleavened Bread moves. It may mean that the Shabbat, which is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, may fall on a Friday or on a Sunday or on a Wednesday. But the weekly Shabbat stays in place. So it's very important. But the first fruits feast always falls on the Sunday morning, on the first day of the week. Very important. And in the day of Jesus' death, and this is the only thing I wanted to say, in the year of his death, what happened there is he was crucified on a Wednesday evening, went into the grave on the Thursday, was in the grave the entire Friday, the entire Saturday, and probably would have gotten up from the, how do you say, would risen from the dead the Saturday night, so that on the Sunday morning when the women went there, because the Bible says on the first day of the week they went there, he was gone. Now the problem is, if you do not understand the feast, you will think that on the day after the Shabbat, that obviously must have been the Saturday. So he was in the grave the Saturday and he was in the grave Friday evening. That would leave you, however creative you look at it, it would give you 1.5 days, which would be a very big problem, because that means Jesus would be a liar. Because he said, I give you a single sign, Matthew 12, and that is the sign of Jonah, the sign of Jonah, that as Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. In other words, 3 periods of 24 hours, he must be in the grave, because Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 periods of 24 hours. And basically he said, to a faithless generation, a generation that seeks for a sign, one thing will be given, and that is the sign of Jonah. We misread those things, and we kind of think, oh, that must be some form of allegory, some form of interesting figure of speech that Jesus have used. But no, I think we should listen to him. He said, I give you a single sign. You want to have signs because this is our generation. We look for signs. That's the sign we need to think about very clearly. Anyway, I am repeating myself. That's the first pilgrim festival up to that point. Now, in the month of Sivan, in Hebrew it's Arach Simanu, that is the 3rd month, we have a single festival. Check this out. First month, 3 feasts. 3rd month, a single feast. Feast of Shavuot, and we will look at that now. So I'm just going to jump forward. And then in the 7th month, and like we all know by now, 7 is a very important number in Hebrew for a list of reasons. By the way, my book that hopefully will be finished by the end of October, the 7th chapter, I decided to call the chapter 7. Chapter 7, because I can't get away from the number 7. It is such a profound word. So therefore, the 7th month, just by sheer virtue of numbers in the Bible, is a fascinating concept. The month of Tishrei, or Etanim, there we find 3 feasts again. Okay, so 3 feasts, 1 feast, and 3 more. That gives us a total of 7 feasts, 3 in the 1st month, 1 in the 3rd month, and 3 in the 7th month. I just find this fascinating. And then the first of these group of festivals is called Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets. We'll talk about that now. Then the second one, which is on the 10th of the 7th month. Maybe I should just put the days in. On the first day, we have that. On the 10th, sorry. Does this update actually when I type it? Does it? Let me just check. Yeah, it does. And this one is 15 to 22. This one is 50 days of counting the Omer. Sorry, my document is incomplete. This is my personality type. Sorry about that. And this one is flexible. All right. Okay, let's talk about Yom Teruah. Yom Teruah, and we're going to get to that now, is loosely, trumpets is not the correct word for that. A trumpet is another word. A trumpet is a shofar in Hebrew. Teruah means to call out. So it's actually the day of calling, or day of, Teruah is to sound. It's it's actually, let's type that out. It's actually day of sounding. This is a better way of putting it in Hebrew. Yom Kippurim, sometimes also called Yom Kippur, day of coverings, actually is also more correct, day of the coverings. Interesting, yeah. And then some people call it Day of Atonement. This day is the darkest day on the Hebrew calendar. I will talk more about this next week. Although, wait. Next week, we won't have a Hebrew gathering because then I'm on a road trip. Okay, how am I going to do that? I'm going to think about that. But they will definitely talk about Sukkot, which is the most famous festival on the Hebrew calendar because it's the most joyous one. And it's all about barbecue and drinking wine and inviting people into your temporary shelters and waving palm trees and festivals on the street. For those of you who've been in Jerusalem during Sukkot, it's one big happy party. I'm sad that we couldn't be in Israel this year. Okay. Sukkot, best translated, is booths. It's the female plural word for the word booth, sukkah. So Sukkot means plural for booths. And some people call it tabernacles. If you say Chag Sukkot, it means Feast of Tabernacles. All right. I hope this is a nice summary. Let's quickly speak about Shavuot. I've prepared something here. Most of this comes from Wikipedia. Apologies. I've checked it and I will comment as we go along. All right. In the Bible, Shavuot marks the wheat harvest in the land of Israel. Exodus 34, verse 22, and we just read it. It reads, "You shall observe the Feast of Weeks with the first fruits of wheat harvest and the Feast of Harvest at the year's end." All right. According to Jewish sages, it also commemorates the anniversary of the giving of the Torah by God to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. Very important. Listen to me very closely. Jewish people actually believe this. They believe that the Feast of Weeks was all about the giving of the Torah. Now, it makes sense if you understand their reasoning, but the Bible never say that. I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm just saying the Bible does not say it. So whatever you make of that, and this, it's a little bit like calling the devil the worship leader in heaven. You know, some people actually believe that. They don't know where it is, and they've never checked the Bible, but because some pastors have preached that. This is the same thing we find here. Some Jewish rabbis teach that the Torah had been given on the Feast of Weeks. Okay, so what we read here is according to the Jewish sages. All right, so they commemorate the anniversary of the giving of the Torah by God to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. The word Shavuot means weeks, that we've covered, and it marks the conclusion of the counting of the Omer. Its date is directly linked to that of Passover. The Torah, and that is biblical, by the way. The Torah mandates the 7-week counting of the Omer beginning on the second day of Passover. This is not the truth. Okay, this is again what the Jews believe, but actually the Bible, if you read Leviticus 23, verse 16 to 23, actually negates this statement. But the Jews do that. What happens is when you look at a Hebrew calendar from an Israeli point of view, the celebration of Shavuot is on a different day than it should be biblically. This is just something to keep in the back of your mind. This counting of the days and weeks is understood to express anticipation and desire for the giving of the Torah. I love that. And I've no problem with a beautiful heart, but it's not necessarily biblical, okay? This is not written in the Bible, but this is the way the Jews view it, and it's important that we just understand that in Jewish tradition, things are not necessarily biblical. All right. On Passover, the people of Israel were freed from their enslavement to Pharaoh, and on Shavuot, they were given the Torah and became a nation committed to serving God. Okay, some of this feels right, some of this is almost right. Be aware of the fact that Shavuot is a difficult festival. The Bible tells us, though, if we read Leviticus 23, verse 16 to 23, and I will do that immediately. Sorry, guys, lots of information. But like I said, let's just start somewhere. Verse 16 of Leviticus 23, let me just stop sharing this. Verse 16 says, verse 15, you shall count from the next day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of wave offering. 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. 7 Sabbaths means 49 days. And then even to the next day after the 7th Sabbath, you shall number 50 days. Shavuot weeks, that's where the name comes from, the festival of 7 weeks, okay, is a 50-day counting of the Omer. So basically, on the Sunday morning within the Feast of Unleavened Bread, all right, literally on the first day of the actual week in this Feast of Unleavened Bread, they start counting, and it ends 50 days later, also on a Sunday, also on the first day of the week. And that counting of the Omer, I don't understand what it's about. There's a lot of clever people that may know much more than I do. But what I do know is that that is a spiritual, almost replica for a much bigger feast called the Year of the Jubilee. Okay, we're not going to go into the Jubilee now. The Jubilee was 6 years ago, 5 years ago. So the next Jubilee is only in 45 years, so you can relax. Most of us will be relaxing very well in 45 years' time. And but I have a feeling that Jesus will return on the next Jubilee. Anyway, don't take me on it. The Bible doesn't say that. But what I do know is the Bible is constantly giving us patterns. And this whole counting of the Omer, 50 days, is a smaller pattern for the bigger pattern for the Jubilee. And the Jubilee, by the way, is the biggest pattern that we find in the Bible. There's nothing bigger than that. There's no 100-year loop or 500-year loop. There is only 50-year loops in the Bible. Then it repeats. So a Jubilee cycle, and by the way, I'm going to tell you something interesting. If you count the generations in the Bible, you will find that the average generation in the Bible is 50 years. Don't you find that interesting? And the Bible actually call a generation a year in a number of places. There's a number. Hebrew is a difficult word because sometimes it alludes to things. But you'll remember that in Genesis 6, God tells Noah, the years of man shall be 120. So it speaks about 120 generations. And a generation being 50 years, 120 times 50 means 6,000. Curious. The years of man will be 6,000. Then something else happens. And then there's a messianic kingdom of 1,000 years. But we'll get to all of these things. Curiously, I always thought that Genesis 6 meant, oh, you're only going to get to 120 now because you know, the atmosphere changed and you were unwell and you have programmed cell death and all sorts of things. The Bible actually gives us a clue that the generations, which being 50 years, will only be 120. But don't take my word, go study that. Nothing
Sorry
that I...
to interject.
Please.
Which Jewish year are we in then? If
Not the one that the rabbis tell us.
Okay,
Definitely.
so they're telling us 5,751. No. Okay.
It cannot be. It cannot be. Not if you count the generations. No.
Okay.
But again, I don't want to be the scholar taking on the rabbis. I'm just saying is I have respect for the rabbis, but I have respect for a number of people's opinions. I have respect for Chuck Missler and this rabbi and, you know, all sorts of Christian and non-Christian teachers. I try to hear what they say. But what I am trying to get across with this whole learning Hebrew is that we shouldn't just jump on any bandwagon and say, oh, that's, you know, it's Rosh Hashanah now this Friday, and then we just run with the things that we don't question. Question freaking everything. This is my encouragement. Question everything. Do not accept anything that I say unless you test it. When you put on the video tonight and you don't go test for yourself, nothing what I said has any meaning. This is important to know. I don't want to be the guy that misleads people. I put out some information, but if you find a contrary information, you put up your hand and then we discuss it. I'm but a scholar, and I'm studying, and hopefully I'm not, hopefully I try and do my best. But what I'm just saying is, I repeat myself, test everything. Where are we? Okay, let's get back to, how late is it? 22. Okay, sorry guys, I'm talking so much. Going back to this. Okay, Leviticus 23, verse 16. That's the only thing I want to say. Actually, I just wanted to read verse 15 and 16. You go read all the rest up to verse 23, which speaks about the whole Shavuot. It's a fascinating festival, and I don't understand it well enough because I'm not a farmer, okay? But from a farming point of view, there's a lot of layers going on. What I do want us to quickly look at, check this out. I found this article on a Messianic website. Let's just read this. There are many compelling similarities between the expression of God's presence on Mount Sinai and his presence among the disciples during Shavuot. Now, sorry for the cough. Again, bear in mind that even some of these Messianic Jews also believe that the Torah was given on Shavuot. Maybe, may not be, we don't know. On Mount Sinai, God's presence was accompanied by fire, smoke, and the sound of thunder. Exodus 19, verse 16 to 19. Actually, you know what? Let's read Exodus 19. It's a great few verses because we miss this. 19, let me just unshare this quickly. 19 verse 16 is this, yeah. First of all, verse 13, Exodus 19 verse 13, no hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through, whether it's an animal or a man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come up to the mountain. Okay, verse 19. It happened on the... No, wait, I am actually jumping the gun. Sorry. This is the wrong verse, boys. Why am I reading this now? Exodus 19. Okay, no, we'll get back to that. Sorry. Pause. That's going to be on the Feast of Trumpets. God's presence was during Shavuot, was accompanied by the sound of wind, tongues of fire, and the gift of different languages. What happened on Mount Sinai and what happened the night or the morning at 9 when all the disciples were together in the upper room has a similar thing. There was fire, there was there was fire and smoke and all sorts of things, and it's a similarity. When God gave the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai, again, here even the Messianic Jews accept something that is not necessarily in the Bible. The people were worshipping the golden calf. About 3,000 people died as punishment for their sins. That is biblical. It happened. And what is interesting, that on the day of Shavuot, on Pentecost as we know it, when Jesus' Spirit was given, when the Spirit of Yahweh was poured out, the people repented and 3,000 people were added to the community of believers. Now, this little 3,000 that died and 3,000 that were added is interesting. And it may very well be that this was the redemption of Shavuot. All right. God's presence was symbolized by a cloud and fire which led the Israelites out of Egypt. Later, God moved his presence into the temple. Chronicles 5, verse 7 and 8 and 13 and 14. During Shavuot, God's presence moved from the temple into a new temple, which was the people themselves. Curious. Finally, the Torah provided God's teachings for the Old Testament community of people. At Shavuot, the Holy Spirit became the teacher of believers. Very important. I don't know enough about the agricultural significance, but it is very interesting what happened at Mount Sinai and what happened in the upper room. And again, let's pause Shavuot until the next Shavuot, and then we'll speak about that. By the way, my birthday was on Shavuot this year. That was also big fun. Let's quickly talk about the Feast of Trumpet that comes up on Friday evening, and then I'm going to be done. All of the feasts, all of the other 6 festivals falls on days that you can count literally by saying, okay, it's the beginning of the month, count first day and the 14th day of the month, it's the Passover. On the 15th, it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The day after the Sabbath within that little week is the first fruits. You count 50 days and boom, you're at Shavuot. When it comes to the Feast of Trumpets, we have a problem. We'll talk about that now. But once you count to the 10th day of the month, you have the day of called Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement, Day of Covering. Easy, you count 10 days, and likewise, when you come to Sukkot, you count 15 days, and on the 15th of the day and up to the 22nd of that month, it's the Feast of Tabernacles. But what do you do on the Feast of on the Feast of Trumpets, problem. Very big problem. The entire Matthew 24 is a chapter that this is the homework that all of us have to go read. Go read what Jesus teaches his disciples at the end. He speaks about a number of phenomena happening. He speaks about the sounding of trumpets. He speaks about as lightning strikes in the east and is seen in the west. And he uses a number of examples. He calls it the day and the hour that no man knows, etc., etc. There's a number of figures of speech that Jesus uses, which all alludes to the Feast of Trumpets. By the way, the Feast of Trumpets in ancient Israel was known as the Feast of the day and hour that no man knows. Let me explain that to you. Because of the lunar solar calendar, you had to wait. After the moon gets dark, you had to wait for the crescent moon. And once the rabbis have spotted the crescent moon, they would then sound the shofar over Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, and that would announce the beginning of the month called Rosh Chodesh, okay? Whatever, Rosh Chodesh Sivan, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, whatever it may be. But what happens when a feast starts on the first of a day? You see what happens. You have to be prepared. And remember, the next thing is days in Hebrew starts at sunset the previous day. For example, the Shabbat on a Saturday starts on a Friday. Oh, there's a fly in my wine. Let me just catch this baby. He's going to make me not want my drink afterwards. Just a second. Gotcha. Sorry, ad break. I'm going to put a mouse on it. This mouse, okay, like that. So the Feast of Trumpets has this problem. It starts on the previous evening because that's the beginning of the day. That's the beginning of the feast. And it comes from a dark moon. And how do you know when it's going to be a crescent moon when it's dark? You can predict it. You can count it. You can work it out with your Griekse telram, with your whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you don't know. And I don't know how many of you have been in Israel, but I've had the privilege of sitting on the Mount of Olives and waiting for the Feast of Trumpets a number of times. I've had some of the experiences, and Ilse, is Ilse still around? Where's Ilse? Is Ilse still around? Did she leave? That's bad. But Ilse, in any case, had been with me on the Mount of Olives while some of the things that Jesus have taught have happened right in front of our eyes. That when lightning strikes in the east and is seen in the west. We have been on a trip once where the whole of the land was covered in dust for 6 days, and it opened up on the last day, which happened to be the Feast of Trumpets. And I planned a little tour so that everybody ended up in Jerusalem, and we were on the Mount of Olives. It opened up that day, unbelievably, completely open. And then as it was getting dark, suddenly the entire sky became overcast with rain clouds. And I can't remember the sequence of the detail, but there were so many people, and usually the internationals wait and the Christians come to the Mount of Olives and they wait for the spotting of the moon. They follow what NASA said whenever the moon would be sighted, and they wait with their shofars. And there was this one Scottish guy who checked, he says, "Look, the moon." And people go ballistic. They blew their shofars, and the next moment, boom, the skies closed up completely, and it started lightning right around the Mount of Olives. It was a little bit like the return of Christ. I have to be honest with you, it was Jews and Gentiles mixed up on the mountain, and it was this freaking scary experience. Thank you. This is my housemate bringing me blueberries like this. He thinks I'm unhealthy, but I'm not. I'm full of grapes. Anyway, so that is one example of the waiting on the mountain, on the Mount of Olives, where some of the stuff that Jesus said really, really happens and has happened before. But now, the thing with the Feast of Trumpets is, sometimes, even in modern times, when you follow the NASA calendar, you wait on the Mount of Olives and nothing happens. I mean, you sit with it. It says that 6% of the moon will be illuminated and will be seen over Jerusalem. And you rock up on the mountain, you wait there, and you're ready with your shofar and your whatever, and there's nothing. And that could happen up to 48 hours that you wait, and you go back the next evening to the Mount of Olives. You wait for the crescent moon. I've had that personally. I once worked in London, bought myself a cheap little flight, flew to Jerusalem for 4 days, just over the Feast of Trumpets. And literally, I had 6% illumination. That, by the way, technically, you should see the moon. I was waiting on the Mount of Olives with my shofar there, and as it was the first night, there was nothing. So I went back to Jerusalem, slept there in a little hostel, went back the second night. Obviously, then it was going to be visible because it get more and more visible every night. Nothing. And 48 hours later, literally 2 days later, this crescent moon was spotted. Now, let's just put all of this together. This feast is all about being prepared and waiting. Being prepared means you anticipate that it will happen. The moon gets dark and you get ready for this feast. Now, if you think about the story that Jesus told about the 10 maidens, the 10 virgins, 5 of them were ready, and 5 of them, when they heard the trumpet blowing, suddenly went like, oh my goodness, we have no oil in our lamps, we need to go fix that, and started running around. And what happened? The groomsmen passed and they actually missed out on the festival. Now, you can hear where this is going. This Feast of Trumpets, I'm not saying Jesus is coming back on the Feast of Trumpets, but what I am saying is there is ample of evidence that he was referring to that event and giving us all the heads up that we need. Be prepared. But be prepared doesn't mean you sit and wait for 90 days. Okay? Be prepared says you almost know the day and the hour, but you don't know the day and the hour. Okay? But you know it's the feast. And you know that the Bible is clear. You read about this in 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 16, when it speaks about the sounding of the trumpet. Read Zechariah 14, when it says when the Messiah will come back and put his feet back on the mountain. A repetition of Exodus 19, where Moses announces to the people of Israel, God, Yahweh, will come down on the mountain. His presence will be so overpowering. Can you see that? That's a replica of that incident. When you hear this, when you hear the trumpet, now is the time to read Exodus 19, verse 13. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it's an animal or a man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come up to the mountain. And then it goes on in verse 16. On the third day, when it was morning, there was thunder and lightning. Again, can you hear Jesus speaking about lightning and thunder? A thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of an exceedingly loud trumpet. And all the people who were in the camp trembled. I just hear Feast of Trumpets. I just hear Jesus saying, fulfillment. Can you hear this? Mount Sinai, Mount of Olives, the Messiah coming back to the Mount of Olives, putting his feet down like Yahweh put his feet down Mount Sinai. This is all prophecy being fulfilled. And when we read about this whole Feast of Trumpets, that, by the way, is now gone in Israel. There's a handful of Messianics, there's a handful of Christians actually that celebrates the Feast of Trumpets. The rest of the nation, they celebrate Rosh Hashanah, head of the year. They don't even know there's a Feast of Trumpets. And I find that is a strategy of the enemy, is hiding the very thing that God wants us to be prepared for, be ready, be waiting for. The way one think of the Feast of Trumpets and the way that we've called it a dress rehearsal, the way we prepare for that is to be mindful and be ready. Because in a night like tonight, that's what we'll say on Friday evening, on a night like tonight, Yeshua will return. I cannot explain to you the joy that I have when I think of being on the Mount of Olives on the Feast of Trumpets and waiting for the moon to be sighted. And I mean, so many times when we've been there, we looked at each other and you see the crescent moon like hanging like the sword over Jerusalem. And we say, on a night like tonight, Yeshua will return. It's unbelievable. And I wish we could have been there now. And maybe we must pray and ask God if there would be a chance next year that we can go, all of us go for a dress rehearsal. Go wait on the Mount of Olives for an exercise of being ready. We may or may not see the moon. And we may have to wait another day. And we may need to go back the next evening. But this is what this whole, the day and the hour that no man's knows. Jesus is not into overcoming us like a thief in the night. Remember, the Bible, 1 Thessalonians says the day of the Lord will be like a thief in the night, but not for you. It doesn't say it's going to be a thief in the night for those who are prepared. Those who are prepared will be waiting. Yes, they won't know the day and the hour, but they'll be ready. It may be in the first hour, it may be in the 48th hour, but we'll be ready. God is not into overcoming us with like a thief, to catch us by surprise. Our Greek minds literally taught us that the day and the hour that no man's know means nobody knows. Like, that's what we hear. But that's not what the Bible says. It says, no, I'm telling you, I'm coming back on the feast that you know you have to be ready for. You have to be waiting. You have to be sitting there with your oil in your lamp, with your shofar in your hand, proverbially, and be ready. And I can be passionate about it tonight because I've seen it a number of times. And it really is probably one of the most powerful experiences on earth, is waiting for the Feast of Trumpets, knowing on a night like tonight, Yeshua will return. So I conclude with this. I've talked way too much. Sorry about that. And I just want to say, on Friday evening, please be mindful. Whether you sit and break bread and have your wine, celebrate Christ, but on a night like Friday evening, Yeshua will return. It could be this round. It could be the next Jubilee. We don't know. Then it's the day and the hour that no man knows. But I have a very strong feeling that the Bible is coaching us that Jesus will be coming back when the trumpet sounds. So may we all be ready. May we commemorate. Maybe like almost celebrate this dress rehearsal on Friday. And curiously, don't you find it interesting that again, Feast of Trumpets fall on a Friday? It's weird. It's again on a Shabbat. These things just keep on lining up. So this is what I have to say tonight. Does it make sense why this is important? And can you understand why this needs to be discussed? Somebody needs to tell us these things. We don't hear this from the pulpit. We don't hear this in our churches. It's a problem. I mean, I want to scream out from the mountaintops.
Maybe you should be doing it, Helmut. That's why
Say
we
again?
need people like you. Maybe you should be doing it. That's why we need people like you.
I'll do my best. I will. I hope next year in the Shemitah I could do proper recordings of all these things. Yeah. But I think enough time is wasted.
Helmut, can I ask you?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Open. I'm finished. I'm finished talking.
Okay, can I ask you where were you exactly in Month of Olives? Because I might be there next Friday.
Danny, unfortunately, I cannot travel at the moment. None of us can. But where I've been in the past was as you go up from the Lion's Gate, there's the prophets. There's the staircase of the prophets, and the big hotel at the top. We usually go there. The big viewpoint.
Okay, yeah, that's easy to reach then. This is
Are you going to go there?
Yeah. Well, basically, I can go there, but I don't have permission to pass.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
I need to figure it out.
Danny, find somebody that can take a photo for us, and you share it with all of us.
He's going to try and get my auntie to drive him through the other checkpoint in her car, which he can pass. Now he's keen on experiencing this because he lives next door and he never heard about any of this. So he's going to try and go and do it this Friday. If he does, he should be the one taking the picture.
Absolutely.
I will, totally.
Danny, even if you can't get close enough, just send us a picture of it would be so cool if the moon could be sighted and somebody could send us a picture of that. That is just like sharing the good news. Because on a night like Friday night, remember, on a night like Friday night, it's not necessarily going to be on a Friday, but I'm saying on a night like Friday night, Yeshua will return. And he will, and read Zechariah 14, by the way, where it says that when the Messiah comes back, he will put his feet on the Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives will thunder and be torn in two, and water will come gushing from the mountain. Half of it will run into the Dead Sea Valley, and half of it will run to the Mediterranean. Do you know what's interesting? There's a hotel right at the top of the Mount of Olives that has been declared so dangerous because there's a fountain underneath it that tries to erupt. They want to close down that hotel, and Zechariah 14, it says that when the Messiah puts his feet down there, the mountain will rip open. Man, this is not science fiction. This is reality TV right in front of us. So yay for going to Israel next year if we're still around, and if some of us are not taken away while the others are still in the field. That's just a joke. I have so many friends making jokes about that, but anyway. No, anyway, next year in Israel, that's the line. Let's pray and ask God for resources and being able to get there. Okay, I'm done. Any other questions, suggestions? Any other input? Brian, you've walked through the land and you want to say something. Where have you been on Feast of Trumpets? Have you been there?
Unfortunately not. No, not over any of the big festivals. Unfortunately not, no. And most of the time was just spent in the desert, so you're very lonely there, but not lonely. Lonely, but
Lonely,
not
but
lonely.
not lonely. This dude, he wouldn't tell you, walked 1,000 kilometers from you did it north-south, did you?
Yeah, yeah.
I met Brian, I think we were drinking beer at, what was it, at the Green Backpackers in Mitzvah Ramon.
It's beautiful, yeah.
I was
Very
the
dirty and very
lazy guy. I was sitting and drinking beer, but you at least did the real thing. Awesome. Okay, Danny, you're our man. We're waiting for the crescent moon. Send a pic from Jerusalem, Friday night.
Don't worry.
Awesome. Okay, everyone. Anybody else for something? Anybody else want to contribute?
I just want to ask the Exodus 19 piece, like according to rabbinical, that's what they actually see it as Shavuot, am I right? Where the Torah was actually handed out, but we are saying that it's most likely rather Yom Teruah.
You see, the problem is there's no reference to Shavuot in that sense because they're not in the land and there's no wheat harvest. Sorry, this is a very important point you're asking. Thank you, Brian. The wheat harvest couldn't be celebrated in the desert because there's no wheat to be harvested. The Feast of Weeks, if you think about it, needed a wheat harvest. You needed to count the sheaves of wheat for 50 days. There was no first fruits from which you could start counting 50 days until they got to the land. So some of the festivals, even in their expression, needed time to go by. Does it make sense? Even within the Old Testament, there's this analogy of fulfillment happens down the line. You get instruction, but then fulfillment takes some time for it to happen. This is what I find curious about this. So this most likely rather refers to the Feast of Trumpets, in my opinion. There's more analogy at Mount Sinai to the return of Christ on the Mount of Olives, in my opinion. Again, the Bible Christ is a mystery. Not all of it is, it's not a look-up table. It's a mystery that has to be sought out. And I think the Father finds enormous joy that we search the scriptures. And together we discover more. But yes, thank you for that. Anybody else? Okay, nobody. It's so lonely. It's so lonely.
Yeah, man. How so I
Are you Brian there? Are you barbecuing in the background?
yes, we brought.
You have that we're in a barbecue vibe going.
Now we're having
cheesecake dessert.
cheesecake dessert.
But like Ziggy said that I bride better than all the guys. Just saying.
Okay.
When you're single,
no,
yeah,
she
Okay.
that's the problem. Now is the question, do we need men?
yes we do.
Well,
Perhaps not flying. Like that's not necessarily the
For
fun.
their
maybe we should
personality.
do a Zoom call. This is a very difficult thing. We should maybe discuss all of this in a.
Maybe with less whiskey. But okay, on the subject matter,
Yes.
and this might be it's a very abstract concept for a very sensory discussion, but do you think that the second coming of Christ is perhaps through his body, which is us, his people, or do you think it would be like a physical return? And like I'm really looking into that at the moment. Like that's something I don't have an answer to yet, but might it be that the manifestation, because we are the body of Christ, so might it be that, I don't know, like the second coming of Christ might not be like he descends upon the Mount of Olives and splits into you and in a physical form.
I'm with you on all points, except if you say he might not come down to the Mount of Olives, while the Bible will not mislead us, telling us that. It's a very good question, by the way. But that, by the way, let me just be very controversial. You've all heard about Jews that come to Christ when they read Isaiah 53 when it speaks about the suffering servant and how you can almost not deny that's how can this not point to Yeshua? Okay, you know what the response is to that? In all of the chapters preceding chapter 53, when it speaks about the servant, it does speak about the nation of Israel. And then suddenly we decide in chapter 53 now it speaks about Christ. This is the argument of the Jews, and it's a great argument. I don't have some of the sages or some of the rabbis that I've spoken to, when they say that, what can I say? I can say, you've got a great point there. I love Isaiah 53, and I believe in my inner man that it speaks about Christ, but that puts a different spin on all of the chapters prior to 53. Make sense? So, but just on the point of Zechariah, where is what is the abbreviation? Zech. Oh, this is not good. Where is it? Zechariah. Oh, there we go. Zechariah 14. Again, difficult because the Bible doesn't go, Jesus will return and then he will land on the Mount of Olives. And it doesn't say that. Just like the Bible doesn't say Jesus' name is Jesus or Yeshua in the Old Testament. We have to dig that out in the Hebrew language. Zechariah 14 verse 4, his feet will stand in that day on the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives will split in two from east to west, making a very great valley. Half the mountain will move toward the north and half of it towards the south. And it goes on. That is hardly figure of speech. I would agree if it was a little bit vague, but it tells you exactly. And then, again, read Daniel chapter 9 when it speaks about the temple, the return, or the Messiah, the anti-Messiah. At this point of the game, the Bible is giving us too much confirmation that there will be a physical event where somebody will return, put his feet on the mountain, and it will split in two. And the inauguration of the Messianic kingdom. And by the way, I want to get to Sukkot, because Sukkot, the festival, which is the great one, it goes on and says, it will happen that everyone who is left of all the nations that came against Jerusalem will go up from year to year to worship the King, Yahweh of hosts, and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. You can't make these things up. The Bible is kind of explicit, So, but is it possible that Christ is already returning in us? I think so, yes. I think Jesus said that. He said, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's here. It's in you. It means that us that collectively demonstrate or become the physical body of Christ. It's a very good question, by the way. But I don't think limited to. I don't think the return of Christ is us waking up and all gathering on the Mount of Olives or jumping up and landing there together. No.
It's a good point. Well, that's actually excellent. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
No. You ask a good question. It's a good question. There's a lot of depth, by the way, in us being an expression of Christ together, functionally. I think that's the single biggest issue in the Christian churches. We don't understand functionality. We don't know what it means that this is my role, this is your role. We need both in equal importance. It may be that the one makes tea in the background and whatever it may be, and maybe that somebody sings and does this or what that. But we're a dysfunctional bunch. That's what we are, and that we should address and fix. My opinion. Okay. Hello, Brendan. I didn't say hello to you. I don't think so. Did I greet anybody else? Did I not greet anybody else? Okay, love you guys. Thank you for saying nothing. Thank you for just sitting there.
Love you too. I love you. I feel that Brendan will forever be our model of the group.
I understand that you've once been pinned to the screen.
I'll just say I'll try and be the humble model, the everyday.
You're representing the character of Christ. Humble, understated.
Bottom of the book.
Okay, guys, bless you. Remember Friday night. Okay, I'll try to post something on the group. Just make something of it to prepare yourselves. Like the 10 virgins, 5 of them were ready. 5 of them had oil in their lamps. 5 of them were expecting the return. Were expecting the bridegroom. Bridegroom. Yeah, almost. So we're expecting the bride. We're expecting the groom. Okay, let's be the ones that are ready. Even though it's just dress rehearsals, God wants, I believe God wants us to go through these things, go through these spaces, because that literally enables us to anticipate and kind of bring Christ back in his due season. All right. Have a fabulous one. Next week, by the way, I'm traveling for a wedding in the Karoo. I don't think I'm going to make it, but I'll keep you posted. It's not my wedding. Relax. Okay.
We are zooming in. You should dress appropriately.
Should I? Okay.
Kona's wedding.
Huh? At
It's
Kona's
fine.
wedding. I know. I'm a groomsman. I get told what to wear. Okay, guys. Bless you. Love you. Speak again.
Yeah.
Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Ali.
Thank you.